covering lesson 62. It's some complicated word problems, but the math involved is all review. Okay, so I'm going to go over those word problems here. So 62.A, I did type on here. We are skipping that, so we don't need to worry about that. We don't work with abstract coefficients. 62.B, we're using linear variation. And linear variation can be thought of as direct variation where the y-intercept is 0. So we're going to be using the intercept form a lot today. We're just going to change, we're not really going to be using x and y. We're going to use different letters because we're going to be solving for things like cost and numbers produced and that kind of thing. So I'm going to do a couple with you, and that should help out with this homework. So number one, the total cost varied linearly with the number produced. So this is what is cluing us into using the linear form of an equation. So when 100 units were produced, the cost was 700. When 400 units were produced, the cost was 2,200. Write an equation that gives cost as a function of the number of units produced. So cost, so I'm going to use my slope-intercept form, but I'm going to replace x and y for the letters they're wanting us to use, and they've told us that here. They're wanting us to write an equation that gives us cost as a function of the number of units produced. So I'm going to put number, actually, of units produced plus b. So notice I've only changed c for y and n for x. So now we're going to, so this is the first thing I'm going to do. Now I'm going to write a system given what they have told me. So this says the cost was 700 when 100 units, and I should probably rewrite that. But so notice I've written an equation for the first sentence. And now I'm going to write another equation for the second part. So when the cost was 2,200 when 400 units were produced. So there is my equation, and now we're going to solve. I'm going to solve using elimination. In this one, sometimes I would use substitution, but I think in this one I'm going to use elimination. So I'm going to multiply, this is a positive 400, so I'm going to multiply this equation by negative 4, because negative 4 times 100 is negative 400. So I'm going to write that up here, or I can write it right here. That would be negative 2,800 equals negative 400 m plus b, and then I'm going to just write this one underneath. So 2,200 equals 400 m plus b. So if I, and this should be, my apologies, I didn't distribute it to the b, this should be negative 4b. So that gives me negative 600 equals negative 3b, right, because the m's cancel. So if I divide by negative 3, I get b equals 200. So using that, I can, now that I have solved for b. So I have solved for b, so we have to, I should have put that at the top, we have to solve for m and b, right? We're wanting to know our slope and our y-intercept. So I've solved for b, now I'm going to solve for m. So you can plug that into any equation. So 700 equals 100 m plus 200. Right, I'm going to subtract 200, so 500 equals 100 m, so m equals 5. So now that I have those, I can write my equation. So the cost will be 5 times the number of units produced plus 200. So I found m and b. And that's all they wanted for this one, is just the equation. All right, so number 2. The cost of doing business varied linearly, so we're using our y equals mx plus b because they mentioned linearly. With the number of hours the store was open. So the cost varied with number of hours. So cost varied with the number of hours. So notice who I replaced, Y and X, to represent what we're using. If the store was open, so here's the systems. If the store was open 50 hours, the cost was $1,400. So let's set that one up first. So if the cost was $1,400 when the store was open 50 hours, oh, I'm sorry, this should be M because I plugged in 50 for H. So C is cost, H is 50, so there's 1. And then the second one said the store was only open 25 hours a week, the cost was $900. So let's set up that a second equation. So the cost was $900 when it was open only 25 hours a week. Okay, now we are going to solve for M and B, and then we will find the cost to keep it open 35 hours a week. But first we need to find an equation. So again, I'm going to use elimination. So I'm going to solve for M and B using elimination method. There's elimination and substitution. And so I'm going to make, this is 50, this is 25, so I'm going to make the bottom a negative 50 so that it will cancel. So I'm going to write this here. So I have negative 1,800 equals negative 50 M minus 2B. And then I'm just going to bring this one right on top so that my terms are lined up. I'm going to add them together. So negative 400 equals negative 1B. So B equals 400. Now I'm going to solve for M. Right? So I'm going to plug that into any equation. So 1,400 equals 50M plus 400. So that would give me 1,000 equals 50M, right? Because I'm subtracting 400. And 1,000 divided by 50, I got that M equals 20. So now I have the cost equals 20 times H plus 400. Right, I solved for M and B. So notice I solved for M and B. So here's M and here's B. Now they'd like me to find what's the cost if it's open for 35 hours a week. So I'm going to plug this in. So C equals 20 times 35 plus 400. And if you enter that in your calculator, I got the cost is $1,100. Okay. So there's the equation, and we determined the value of the question they were asking. So last one, the costs of a landfill varied linearly. So Y equals MX plus B. If 15 loads, oh, and this is the cost varies with loads of dirt. So I'm going to do C equals ML plus B, where C is cost and L is loads of dirt. So the first equation, if 15 loads were used, the cost was $17.25. So that's the first one. So the cost was $17.25 when I used 15 loads. The second one, so here's equation 2. The cost was $28.50 if 30 loads were used. Again, I'm going to solve using elimination. So the opposite of positive 15 would be to multiply this by negative 2. And I'm going to write the result to the right, and then I'll add it to the second equation. So negative 2 times 17.25 is 34.50. Sorry, I'm 17 times 2 and 25 times 2. So yeah, so that's negative 34.50 equals negative 30M minus 2B. The bottom equation is 28.50 equals 30M plus B. And that gives me negative 600 equals negative 1b. So b equals 600. So I've solved for b. Now I'm going to plug it in to find m. So 1725 equals 15m plus 600. That gives me 1125 equals 15m. So m equals 75. So now I can write my equation. C equals 75 times the loads plus 600. There's my equation. And they're asking what would a landfill of only 10 loads cost. So cost equals 75 times 10 plus 600. And so I said the cost, this gives me $7.50 plus 600 would give me a cost of $13.50. Sorry, I'll move that down. My apologies. And that is it to this section. There is not a second part. So on the back of this, I'll write the homework we are skipping. So for homework 62, skip numbers 6, 9, 13, 22, 28, and 30.